What if I told you that the house you have been living in, the house where your children sleep every night, the house where you feel the safest, was never really yours? That someone else was already inside long before you arrived. Someone who watched you unpack your boxes, hang your pictures on his walls, and tuck your daughters into bed in his rooms. Every single night while your family slept, he sat in his chair by the upstairs window, looking out over the garden he planted with his own hands decades before you were ever born. You never saw him. Your wife never saw him. But your 4-year-old daughter did. She saw him every single day and she tried to tell you. She told you about the old man who watches from the window. The old man who never blinks and never speaks. And you smiled and told her it was just her imagination. It wasn't. His name was Harold Dunne and he built that house in 1987. He designed every room, chose every doorknob, and planted every flower in that garden himself. That house wasn't just where Harold lived. It was the only thing he ever truly loved. And when he died alone in that reading chair in 2011, staring out that same upstairs window, something refused to leave with him. Something that would not accept the house belonging to anyone else. 3 families moved in after Harold passed. 3 families who arrived with hope and excitement and plans for a future inside those walls. 3 families who packed up and disappeared without ever explaining why. No interviews. No complaints. No warnings left behind for whoever came next. They just left. And then came the Mercers. Mark and Elena Mercer found the listing in the summer of 2019. A stunning 4-bedroom colonial sitting on 2 acres of land in a quiet little town called Hollow Creek, Virginia. The price was nearly 40% below market value. The realtor had a simple explanation. The previous owners relocated overseas and wanted a quick sale. No red flags. No reason to hesitate. The Mercers had 2 young daughters and a growing need for space, and this house checked every single box. They signed the papers in 3 weeks, and on a bright Saturday morning the moving trucks rolled in and Elena stood in the front yard holding her youngest daughter's hand and whispered, "This is home now." And for a beautiful fleeting moment it truly felt like it was. But a house that someone loved that deeply and that obsessively for that many years does not simply forget. It holds on. And when new people walk through the front door and start rearranging the furniture and repainting the walls and calling it theirs, whatever lingers inside begins to push back. At first it was quiet. Doors that wouldn't stay shut. Cold spots that crept through the hallway in the dead of July. Muddy footprints near the garden that belonged to no one and led absolutely nowhere. Small things you laugh off because the alternative is something you are not ready to face. But it did not stay quiet. Because one October night both of the Mercer girls woke up screaming at the exact same moment in separate rooms saying the exact same thing. An old man was standing at the foot of their bed staring at them without a single word. And when Mark burst into his youngest daughter's room the air was so cold he could see his own breath. And there on the fogged window, traced slowly by a finger from the inside, were 3 words. "This is my house." To understand what happened to the Mercer family you have to understand who they were before Hollow Creek. Mark and Elena had spent the better part of 6 years renting a cramped 2-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of Richmond. Mark worked as an insurance adjuster and Elena ran a small daycare out of their living room to stay close to their daughters. Their oldest, Sophie, was 7 and already sharing a bedroom with her little sister Lily who had just turned 4. The apartment walls were thin enough to hear every argument from the neighbors and every siren that cut through the night. It wasn't a bad life but it was a tired one. The kind of life where you fall asleep scrolling through real estate listings on your phone dreaming about a backyard and a front porch and rooms where your kids could actually spread out and breathe. So when Mark stumbled on the Hollow Creek listing one night in late May he sat up in bed and nudged Elena awake. She looked at the photos and looked at the price and said there has to be something wrong with it. Mark laughed and said maybe we just got lucky for once. They drove out the following weekend. Hollow Creek was the kind of town that looked like it belonged inside a postcard. Tree-lined streets, white picket fences, neighbors who waved at strangers from their porches. The house sat at the end of a long gravel driveway flanked by tall oaks whose branches stretched over the path like arms reaching for each other. When Elena stepped out of the car she just stood there for a moment staring up at the house with her hand over her mouth. It was a colonial-style home with dark shutters and a wraparound porch and a garden along the east side that looked like someone had tended to it with the kind of care most people reserve for things they love more than themselves. The realtor was already waiting at the front door. She was friendly and polished and had answers for everything. She told them the home had been built in the late 80s by a private owner and had passed through a few hands over the years. When Elena asked why it was priced so far below market, the realtor smiled and said the sellers were overseas and motivated, and that in a market like this sometimes timing is everything. She never mentioned Harold Dunne. She never mentioned the 3 families who left. She never mentioned that the last owners had broken their lease 4 months early and forfeited their deposit just to get out faster. None of that made it into the conversation. Mark and Elena walked through every room that afternoon, and each one felt like a small revelation. The hardwood floors were immaculate. The kitchen had been updated but still carried a warmth that felt original to the home. Upstairs there were 4 bedrooms, each one bright and spacious, and Elena immediately started imagining which one would be Sophie's and which one would be Lily's. But it was the reading nook by the upstairs window that stopped Elena in her tracks. A small alcove with built-in shelves and a wide window that looked out over the garden below. She turned to Mark and said, "I could sit here forever." She didn't know that someone already had. That someone had died in that very spot 14 years earlier in a chair that faced that very window and looked down at that very garden. The Mercers put in an offer that evening. It was accepted within 48 hours. And just like that, the family who had spent years dreaming of a home finally had one. What they didn't have was any idea of what was waiting for them inside it. Before we go any further, I need you to do something for me. If you are watching this in the dark right now, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications, because the stories on this channel only get darker from here and you do not want to miss what comes next. Now let me take you back. Long before the Mercers ever set foot on that property, there was only one man who walked those halls, and his name was Harold Dunne. Harold was a retired architect who had spent 30 years designing buildings for other people. Office towers, municipal buildings, libraries, structures that carried other people's names and other people's legacies. By the time he retired in 1985, Harold had made a comfortable living, but he had never built anything that truly belonged to him. He had no wife, no children, no family to speak of. What he had was a plot of land in Hollow Creek, Virginia, and a vision that had been living inside his head for longer than most people keep anything alive. In 1987, Harold broke ground on the house. He did not hire a contractor. He did not consult with a team. He drew every blueprint himself and oversaw every nail that went into the frame. Neighbors who lived on the surrounding properties at the time said Harold was out there every single day from sunrise to sunset, talking to the structure as if it could hear him. He chose the wood for the floors himself. He hand-selected every fixture and fitting. He built the wraparound porch with cedar he had shipped in from Oregon because he said cedar ages with grace and he wanted his home to grow old beautifully. The garden along the east side of the house was the last thing he completed. He planted it in the spring of 1988, and from that point forward he tended to it every single morning without exception. Roses, lavender, jasmine, each one placed with a precision that made the garden look less like a hobby and more like a declaration. This is mine and I will take care of it until I cannot anymore. And he did. For over 20 years Harold lived inside that house completely alone. He rarely accepted visitors. The few neighbors who attempted to introduce themselves were met with polite but short conversations that always ended at the front porch. Harold never invited anyone inside. Not once. The house was his and his alone, and he maintained it with an obsession that went far beyond pride. Every surface was spotless. Every room was arranged with intention. If a single book was out of place on the shelf, Harold would notice before the day was over. The house did not age the way houses normally do because Harold would not allow it to. He preserved it the way someone preserves a living thing they cannot bear to watch deteriorate. And then on a cold morning in November of 2011, Harold Dunne died. He was found 6 days later by a mail carrier who noticed the letters piling up. Harold was sitting in his reading chair in the small alcove by the upstairs window. His eyes were open and aimed at the garden below. The coroner said he had likely passed in his sleep, but the expression on his face was not one of peace. It was one of someone who was not finished yet. If you are still watching right now, drop a comment below and tell me, would you have bought this house knowing what you know now? Because the Mercers did not know any of this. They moved their daughters into Harold Dunne's rooms and hung their photos on Harold Dunne's walls and sat in the alcove where Harold Dunne took his last breath. And whatever Harold left behind was already awake. The first 3 weeks in the house were everything the Mercers had hoped for. Sophie claimed the bedroom at the end of the hall and Lily took the smaller room next to her parents. Elena set up a reading corner in the alcove by the upstairs window, and Mark spent his weekends mowing the lawn and learning the layout of the property. They had cookouts on the back porch, and Elena started a journal where she wrote about how grateful she was that they had finally found a place to call home. Life felt full and quiet and right. And then the house started to speak. It began with the doors. Elena noticed it first. She would close the kitchen pantry before going to bed, and by morning it would be wide open. She mentioned it to Mark, and he said the latch was probably old and needed replacing. He fixed it that weekend. The next morning it was open again. Then it was the hallway closet. Then the bathroom door. Then Sophie's bedroom door. One by one, doors that had been firmly shut the night before were found standing open by the time the sun came up, as if someone had walked through the house during the night, making sure every room was accessible, every space accounted for, the way someone does when they are checking on a home they know by heart. Mark told Elena it was drafts. Old houses breathe, he said. Elena nodded, but she stopped journaling after that. Then came the cold. In the middle of July, with the thermostat set to 72, the upstairs hallway would drop in temperature so suddenly that you could feel it on your skin the moment you stepped into it. Mark called an HVAC technician who inspected the entire system and found nothing wrong. No leaks, no blockages, no mechanical explanation. The technician shrugged and said sometimes old houses have pockets of air that just settle differently. But the cold only ever appeared in one place. The hallway directly outside the alcove where Harold Dunne's reading chair once sat. Elena stopped using the reading nook after the second week. She told Mark the light in there just didn't feel right anymore. She didn't say what she actually felt, which was that every time she sat in that alcove she had the unmistakable sensation that someone was standing behind her. Then came the footprints. One morning in early August, Elena went out to water the garden and stopped dead in her tracks. There were muddy footprints pressed into the soil along the east side of the house. They started at the garden bed and moved in a slow, deliberate loop around the roses and lavender and jasmine, as if someone had been walking through the garden, inspecting each plant one by one, the way a person does when they are checking on something they have cared for their entire life. The footprints did not match Mark's boots. They did not match Elena's shoes. They did not belong to either of the girls. And they led nowhere. They simply started at the garden and ended at the garden, as though whoever made them had come from inside the house and returned to it. Elena told Mark, and he stood there staring at the prints for a long time without saying a word. That night, for the first time since they moved in, Mark locked every door and every window before going to bed. He didn't tell Elena why, but she already knew. Something was wrong with the house. Something had been wrong since the day they arrived. They just were not ready to say it out loud, because saying it out loud would mean the dream was over, and the Mercers had waited too long for this dream to let it go that easily. By September, the Mercers had settled into a quiet kind of denial. Mark stopped talking about the footprints. Elena stopped mentioning the cold spots in the hallway. They moved through the house the way people move through a place they no longer fully trust but cannot bring themselves to leave. But Lily had no such filter. Lily was 4 years old, and 4-year-olds do not know how to lie about what they see. The truth is, Lily had been noticing things long before either of her parents were willing to listen. It started as early as their second week in the house. Lily would stand at the top of the stairs and refuse to walk down the hallway alone. When Elena asked her why, she would say the air feels funny over there, Mama. She would point to the alcove by the upstairs window and say it smells like old clothes in there, like someone's grandpa. One evening, Mark found Lily sitting cross-legged on the floor of her bedroom, staring at the wall with her head slightly tilted. When he asked what she was doing, she said she was listening to the man walk. Mark asked what man, and Lily said the one who walks around the garden at night. He walks real slow, like he is counting the flowers. Mark told her there was no one outside, and Lily just nodded and went back to listening. Then there were the drawings. Elena found the first one tucked inside Lily's coloring book. It was a crayon sketch of the house, but in the upstairs window Lily had drawn a figure. A tall shape with dark eyes and no mouth standing perfectly still behind the glass. Elena asked Lily who it was, and Lily said that is the man who lives in the walls. He watches us from up there when we play outside. Elena felt her stomach drop, but she told herself it was nothing. Kids draw strange things all the time. But the drawings kept coming. Every few days Elena would find another one. Sometimes the figure was in the window. Sometimes it was standing at the edge of the garden. Sometimes it was inside the house, standing at the end of the hallway just outside Lily's bedroom door. And every single time the figure looked the same. Tall, dark eyes, no mouth, perfectly still. Lily also started refusing to eat breakfast at the kitchen table. She told Elena the chair at the end of the table was not for them. When Elena asked what she meant, Lily said, "That is his chair, Mama, we are not supposed to sit in it." She said it with the kind of certainty that made Elena's skin go cold, because Lily was not guessing and she was not pretending. She was reporting. The final sign came in late September. Elena was putting Lily to bed and Lily grabbed her mother's hand and said, "Mama, the man is sad." Elena asked why and Lily said, "Because we moved his things. He doesn't like it when we move his things." Elena asked what things and Lily looked toward the hallway and said, "Everything, Mama. This is his house. He wants us to know that." Elena did not sleep that night. She sat on the edge of her bed replaying every single thing Lily had said over the past 2 months, and for the first time she did not try to explain it away. She did not call it imagination or a phase or a child's overactive mind. She sat there in the dark and admitted to herself that her 4-year-old daughter had been trying to warn them since the very beginning and they had not listened. And whatever was inside that house had been watching them the entire time, waiting to see how long it would take before the adults finally caught up to what a child had known all along. Now, before I tell you what happened next, I need you to really think about this. If your child had been telling you for weeks that someone was inside your house and then you started hearing things and seeing things that you could not explain, would you stay? Drop your answer in the comments right now, because the Mercers stayed, and what happened on the night of October 14th made sure they would never forget that decision. It was a Friday and the house had been unusually still all day. No cold spots. No open doors. No footprints in the garden. Elena noticed the silence first and told Mark, "It feels like the house is holding its breath." Mark laughed it off, but Elena could see the tension in his shoulders. He felt it too. That night Elena put both girls to bed by 8. Sophie fell asleep quickly, but Lily sat up in bed and whispered, "Mama, he is upset tonight." Elena asked what she meant and Lily said, "The man. He is walking faster." Elena kissed her forehead and told her to close her eyes and that nothing was going to hurt her. She shut the door and stood in the hallway for a moment listening. The house was completely silent. Mark and Elena went to bed just after 10. The house was dark and still, and for the first time in weeks Elena felt like maybe she could sleep. She was wrong. At exactly 2:13 in the morning, both Sophie and Lily screamed. Not one after the other. At the exact same time. 2 separate rooms. 2 separate children. One identical scream that cut through the house like a blade. Mark was on his feet before he was fully awake. He ran down the hallway and threw open Sophie's door first. Sophie was sitting upright in bed, clutching her blanket to her chest, shaking so hard her teeth were clicking together. She looked at Mark and said, "Daddy, there was a man standing right there at the foot of my bed. He was just staring at me. He wouldn't stop staring." Mark told her to stay in bed and ran to Lily's room. Lily was not screaming anymore. She was sitting perfectly still in the middle of her bed with tears running down her face and her eyes locked on the corner of the room. Mark grabbed her and said, "What happened?" and Lily whispered, "He touched my blanket, Daddy. He pulled it off me and just looked at me. He looked so angry." Mark carried both girls into the master bedroom and Elena held them while Mark searched every inch of the house. Every room. Every closet. Every corner. There was no one there. But when he reached the upstairs hallway, he stopped. The air was so cold he could see his own breath hanging in front of his face in the middle of October in a house with the heat set to 70. And then he looked at the window at the end of the alcove. The glass was fogged from the inside, completely covered in a thin layer of condensation that should not have been there. And in the center of that fogged glass, traced slowly and deliberately by a single finger, were 3 words. "This is my house." Mark stood there staring at those words and felt something standing behind him. He did not turn around. He could not. Every muscle in his body locked, and he stood frozen in that hallway with the cold pressing against his back like a hand and the words on the glass glowing faintly in the moonlight. And then right beside his ear, so close he could feel the air move, came a whisper. A single rasping breath that said, "Stay." If you are still here right now, smash that like button and do not forget to subscribe. The Mercers packed everything they could that night. Elena grabbed the girls and wrapped them in blankets and carried them to the car without turning on the hallway lights. Mark stuffed suitcases with whatever he could reach in the dark because neither of them wanted to spend one more second standing still in that house. Sophie did not speak. She sat in the back seat with her arms around her little sister and stared straight ahead like a child who had just learned that the world is not as safe as her parents had promised. Lily was the only one who looked back. As the car pulled out of the driveway, she turned in her seat and stared up at the house through the rear window. Elena asked her what she was looking at, and Lily said, "He is in the window, Mama. He is watching us leave." Elena did not turn around. She kept her eyes on the road and held Mark's hand so tightly her knuckles turned white. They checked into a motel 14 miles outside of Hollow Creek, and they did not sleep. Mark sat on the edge of the bed with his head in his hands, going over every detail of the past 4 months. The doors, the footprints, the cold, the humming, the rocking chair that moved on its own. The drawings Lily had made of a tall figure with dark eyes and no mouth. The words traced on the fogged glass from the inside. "This is my house." He thought about Dorothy at the library and the 3 families who had come before them. The couple who lasted 5 months. The family who lasted 3. The husband who was seen loading a truck at 4 in the morning with tears running down his face. Mark understood that man now. He understood what it felt like to find something you thought was a blessing and realize it was never yours to begin with. The Mercers never went back. They hired a moving company to collect the rest of their belongings, and they were told that when the movers arrived, the front door was already standing wide open. Every light in the house was on. Every window was fogged. And the rocking chair that the Mercers had never owned was sitting in the alcove by the upstairs window facing the garden as if it had always been there. The house went back on the market within a month, listed well below value again. No explanation given for why the family left. The listing agent was not the same realtor who had sold it to the Mercers. That woman had quietly left the agency, and no one in town seemed to know where she went. As of the time of this recording, the house on Hollow Creek has still not been sold. It sits at the end of that gravel road surrounded by oak trees, with the garden along the east side still somehow blooming even though no one has tended it in years. And if you believe what the neighbors say, you can still see a faint shape in the upstairs window on certain evenings just before dusk. A figure sitting perfectly still, looking down at the flowers with the patience of a man who has nowhere else to be. Some people believe that when someone pours their entire life into something, a piece of them stays behind forever. Harold Dunne built that house with his own hands. He lived in it for over 20 years. He died in it. And if the Mercer family's experience tells us anything, it is that Harold never had any intention of leaving. So I have to ask you, what would you have done? Would you have stayed after the first sign, or would you have run the moment your child said she saw someone watching? Tell me in the comments, because I want to hear your answer. And if this story kept you up tonight, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story from MissCreepyFace. I will see you in the next one, if you dare.